So before I get into this video, again, I want to make a very clear disclaimer that Volume 4 of Jobless Reincarnation, the review, will be going over Part 2 of Season 1 of the actual anime itself. So, of course, if you haven't read the volume and you don't want spoilers for Part 2 of Jobless Reincarnation, I would suggest not watching this video, as it will contain spoilers of what happens beyond Episode 11 of Part 1 of Season 1. The reason why I'm reading this is because there have been too many spoilers out there, and it's just best that I actually start reading the light novels rather than waiting for Part 2. So again, you have been warned, this will have spoilers for Part 2 of Season 1 of Jobless Reincarnation. But getting into Volume 4, I really was quite surprised with some things in this volume. The first one was, of course, this new character that was introduced for a short period. There's like the Great Emperor of the Demons, and how she gave a demon eye to Rudy. At the start, I was kind of curious. I was like, okay, you're clearly going to power up Rudy even more. What is he going to take? Is he going to take X-ray, or is he going to take some other types of ones? But he ends up going sort of with the sort of, I wouldn't say it's time travel, but it's more like fast sight. So he's able to see a couple of seconds ahead of himself, a very small amount, and that gives him basically the ability to see just a little bit ahead, but not too much. And it is very useful in certain situations, but of course he learned very quickly a good fighter can very quickly outmaneuver that, especially if you're kind of making decisions based on, okay, well, if he does this, I'll do this, if he does that, I do this. And so it kind of messes with the eye a little bit because it can't see the future completely, or it shows multiple futures and it kind of blurs the eye. So Rudy's definitely got a lot of learning to do with that power, but it really does give him quite an edge. And I mean, he already has an insanely high mana pool, which was something that was pointed out early on in the volume itself. Someone pointed out that he has a very large mana pool. Of course, it kind of went over his head a little bit, but for us, the readers, we know that, again, he definitely does have an advantage against the general magic user. And of course, other people have learnt about, instant casting without having to do, the incantations and saying all the words necessary to make the spell play out. So of course, he does have some advantages, but of course, other people have learnt also that he is teached. But I think what gives him another advantage is this demon eye. And I don't think it's really going to be that much of a game breaker. I think it's going to be very situational, and it was definitely used in different situations here. And I think it's going to be something that will happen much more going forward. But again, it's clear that this character, the Great Emperor of the Demons, clearly she's going to reappear at some point in the future. I expect that as much, even though she was in for a short period. I'm sure we'll see her again. Maybe we won't. Maybe we'll never see her again. That would definitely be a bit of a laugh. The fact that, she got introduced and then disappeared and voila, never to be seen again. But of course, the man god himself actually makes a reappearance. Of course, mentions about how the original path wasn't the best path. So of course, he was going on about a better path. And I think what was really funny was the fact that with Rudy and the whole pet situation in the previous volume, he could have played that out way better if he actually did things in a certain manner. And the fact is even the man god himself says that he did things completely different to what he was going to recommend. And that because Rudy went down a much more little bit of a devious path, things played out negatively rather than positively, which is why Rudy wasn't particularly happy with the man god, which is why I mentioned the better path. Because if Rudy actually just handed them in from the very beginning rather than working with them, things would have gone much, much, much better, which again just shows that different paths equal different outcomes, and you just work with what you can. But of course, small mistakes can lead into rippling effects, which then you just got to deal with the situation at hand. I think one of the major parts to this is, of course, getting the money necessary to cross the border, and they end up running into a situation where they do a job to free some people that are kidnapped, which then leads into kind of like they planned it all along, that they wanted them to do it, to then do it anyway. It is very much of the person that was using them to do the job was then also sort of setting them up for something else later on, which then leads Rudy to getting captured, getting mistreated. I think what was funny about that scene was that he was getting fed in the jail, and every time he's like, oh yeah, this is really nice, they fed him again. And I actually thought they were trying to fatten him up, but because they were going to eat him, but they ended up not doing that. I was like, oh, I kind of thought they were going to do it because of the fact that, you know, they've got him in jail. They're feeding him really good food. He's a prisoner. They don't like him. They're angry at him. And they're like, oh yeah, have this really nice food. And he's like, oh yeah, I really like this. Well, have some more. And I'm just like, why give good food to your prisoner and treat them nicely if you really don't like them? And then give them extras. I was like, maybe they're just trying to fatten him up and they're going to spit roast him. But nope. Apparently that was just because, of course, the fact that they were doing that job to rescue the people that were imprisoned and going to be sold off, they ended up making a couple of friends amongst those beast people, which of course one of them took pity and basically said, yeah, give him some nice food and a little bit extra. But of course the people that ended up also rocking up saw that he was being a little bit naughty with his behavior, the fact that he touched them. Basically it's kind of like this individual that's kind of treated as a deity, and anyone that touches him is kind of like, oh my god, you've done the bad thing. So of course Rudy, trying to set them free by touching them, taking the collar off, ended up leading him into getting into trouble. But of course, because of the fact that they were being set up to free the people to then re-kidnap them later on, led to the forest being burnt down, which then of course, where Rudy was being stored in a prison within the village, led to it catching on fire. There was an attack. Of course, Rudy got out. There was another guy that was also in prison with him. The interactions between them was weird. And the fact that Rudy was trying to be like a mobster, it was kind of weird on that part as well. It's kind of like, okay, Rudy, you're being very, very overly confident for someone that's in prison. But of course, the forest catches on fire. They break out. They ended up helping the beast people because it's the right thing to do, which of course our lovely Boldy boy himself is a big lover of protecting children, so of course I think Rudy kind of figured probably the best thing to do, along with a bunch of other decisions that he had to make as well. It's definitely a very much of a roller coaster of things going on, but the very big focus is of course the beast people, and then of course Eris does play a bit of a part in this as well. Mainly at the end she kind of reappears and kind of, you know, interacts with the beast people, and she's kind of learning things, interacting with them. At the start, she's there, you know, trying to help out, getting into scuffles and fights and all that, but she kind of, again, she takes a bit of a backseat. And again, a lot of that falls to the fact that because she can't speak the language fluently and well enough, it kind of puts her in a situation where she's kind of just an additional member. She's a third wheel to the party. So it's definitely sad because I like Eris and how she can be kind of a bit flary in the story and she spices things up, but it's understandable as well, and it's realistic that she's kind of like the third wheel. But at the same time, in the early stages of the volume, she was getting into scuffles all the time because she's starting to learn some of the language, so she's getting into more fights because she can understand what they're saying. So there's definitely a lot of interesting back and forth. But of course, they're getting much closer to their overall goal of getting back to the people. The extra part, though, is of course Roxy. There's an extra section about Roxy in there and sort of the adventure party that she's working with to kind of find Rudy and the rest. And the elf girl was definitely, let's just say she has a very interesting taste in relationships. And the dwarf itself, he is just weird, I think, but the elf is just okay. Very, very, very much. This volume has a lot of people that are very, very similar in how they behave, especially like Rudy, his dad, his mom, and then of course Eris's family, and then of course this elf girl. Some of these people are really thirsty, let's just say that. But again, look at real life, there are very much some thirsty people out there, so I guess I can understand that perspective as well. But of course, Roxy is a lot more innocent, she's pure. But at the same time, Roxy was getting a little bit, you know, on the edge, especially with the fact that she was hearing things going on when the elf was bringing a certain group of people back to her room to do activities. Roxy just barges in, and then it's like, oh, you want to join in? And it's just like, Roxy's just like, you know, you're this close to just getting a pummel. Which I thought was just hilarious. I love Roxy. She's pure, she's innocent. I love those little moments where we get to see her adventure, and I do want to read the manga that is dedicated towards her as well. The reason why I haven't yet is because there is some spoiler stuff in there, so I'm kind of getting through a couple of these volumes first, and then I'm going to go read the manga side story that is focused towards her, and then I'm going to talk about her and those manga volumes when I get to those, which I'm very much excited for. And very interested to see where this volume goes, because they're getting so close now, and clearly they're almost at the finish line of where they need to get, and something is obviously going to happen in volume 5. I'm extremely excited. I know I've heard a lot of people say that, you know, the second core of season 1, which is again part 2, is where things really start to pick up. Like the first sort of 3 volumes are kind of like the warm-up, and things really start to pick up. This volume is definitely got a lot of interesting stuff in it, especially with the Demon Eye, especially with the Beast People, especially, you know, learning about some other characters that were introduced. As I mentioned before, that particular great Emperor of the Demons, she appears. I wonder if she'll reappear again. We'll just have to wait and see. But I definitely think there's some potential from this volume that will lead on to other things in the future. Where that ends up turning out, definitely super excited. So again, I'd love to know your thoughts in the comment section down below. What did you think of volume 4 of Jobless Reincarnation? Again, I will be continuing to read them forward along with a bunch of other stuff, so definitely have that to look forward to. But again, if you like this video, hit the like button, subscribe for more anime content, and I'll see you beautiful nerds in the next video.